Well, in the US and Canada, we're used to strike action by employees, but in Iran, there's a strike taking place that could potentially paralyze the Iranian regime. Also, if you're planning to travel, make sure you keep one South American country off your list. And foreign students trying to apply for visas to U.S. schools now going through a much more rigorous screening process that includes their social media accounts. So here to chat about it all is, and so much more, is our foreign affairs contributor and editor of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, great to have you back again. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so Lisa, this is an interesting one. So there's a nationwide trucker strike happening in Iran, and it looks like it has the potential to paralyze their regime. So, it could even have more effect if other sectors of Iran's economy go on strike as well. But we've now got President Trump urging people to support these striking truckers. So, Lisa, how did this all start? It seems to be showing that there's a deep disenchantment among Iranians for their regime, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's exactly the most important point here to be made is that this is not just about the truckers. This is not just industry specific. We've seen a lot of protests throughout the last, especially 2 decades, where you have the egg protests over the prices of eggs, you have the pensioners protests, you have teachers protests, and now truck drivers protests, which we've seen one other time. But the reason why it has such an effect is that it's basically like a copycat type of society. We know that the majority of the 85 million people who live in Iran are disenchanted with the government. And when they do come out in strikes like this is not just industry specific. It's about the entirety of the system, the entirety of them wanting to demand rights and freedom and really are protesting their government. Now, they're asking for support from the Western world, and that's especially on the backdrop of Iran nuclear deals happening. Now, it's very interesting that we're seeing Donald Trump support them and asked for people to support them, while at the same time, sitting at the negotiating table with their government, trying to strike a nuclear deal. A nuclear deal, in the eyes of the Iranian people, would only throw a lifeline to this regime. It would take them off of the pressure that is currently being put onto the people, onto the government of Iran by the Trump administration. As we know, when he came back into office the second time around, he reinstated his maximum pressure campaign, which he had on the first administration, which really helped to curb at least their terror spending. We saw October 7th happen under the Biden administration because of the money that they were able to bring in. Now, we need to starve the regime so that they don't put money into their terror proxies, so that they don't continue with their nuclear program, so that they don't continue with human rights abuses, as we're seeing the people of Iran tell the world.
You're saying there were strikes before. Is there any fear of retaliation, though?
Absolutely. And I think that is one of the main reasons we haven't seen a more successful movement or revolution. We saw the Green Revolution of 2009 it started as a presidential election, kind of protesting that. Then they came out to be, against the entire regime. Then we saw the Women Life Freedom protests. That was another major one when Masa Amini, a 22-year-old, was brutally murdered because she was showing some of her hair underneath her Islamic headscarf. This happens, and then they have those brutal crackdowns. And when you have the crackdowns, it kind of scares people from going back out. But I will say this: 46 years this regime has been in power, and we have seen the protests become more and more bold, more courageous, and the Iranian people saying we will risk our lives in order to show the world that we do not want this regime. So we're seeing it across the country. That's another important point to make. We're seeing it across all socioeconomic brackets. We're seeing it across all types of ethnic backgrounds, all parts of the city, and we're seeing all parts of the country, rather. And it's quite important. I think they're telling the world that this is not just about truckers. It's really about the entirety of the system.
Wow. Okay, looking to another part of the world here. According to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Hamas's Gaza chief has been eliminated, is what he's saying, but Israeli military sources are saying that they're not yet able to confirm this death. So, Lisa, can you tell us more about this?
So this news broke a while ago that they believed that they got Sinwar, Mohammed Sinwar, that he was eliminated based on the intel that was given. They knew where he was, and they struck that area to pinpoint and target him, as the now de facto leader of Hamas. Benjamin Netanyahu came out this morning and said, "I will confirm that this did happen." So it is big news that the prime minister would come out and make such a statement. We're seeing a lot of movement. This war has it started on October 7th, 2023. So we're day 600 of this war. There are still hostages being held in Gaza. The war still rages on, and sometimes we see a lot of movement over a certain week, and sometimes we don't see any movement at all. This week there was a lot of movement in terms of aid not getting to the people in Gaza. And again, we have footage that it is not the Israelis withholding the aid, but Hamas withholding the aid. We also have footage I got this morning of Palestinians dancing around and praising Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu for getting aid to them. Very interesting. I think it's interesting to see the narrative that is being pushed not only by the West, not only by pro-terror elements, but by the media, whether it's lazy reporting or complicit reporting, where you want to frame the West, you want to frame the UN, you want to frame Netanyahu, you want to frame Donald Trump and say the Europeans, the Americans, Israelis are not getting food to the Palestinians, but yet it is obviously Hamas that is not letting the food get to the Palestinian people and hoarding it and killing people who are actually trying to approach the truck. So it's very important to note these kind of shifts in the war. Hopefully, we see some kind of public sentiment and global sentiment shift, and understand that Hamas has to be eliminated, that the Palestinian people cannot have a future under terror leaders like Hamas, and that the Israelis are in it to win it, to get the hostages back, and of course to eliminate the threats of Hamas.
Okay, the U.S. State Department is wrapping up the screening process of foreign students. Lisa, they're now doing mandatory social media checks as part of their vetting process for students applying for visas. And the effort is the latest initiative to crack down on immigration and revoke visas of those attending academic institutions who have publicly supported Hamas. So, Lisa, can you give us more details about this?
Yes. So this is more of that pendulum swinging. We have seen over the last year and a half some crazy activity on college campuses where you would never imagine that this is a kind of prestigious Ivy League, whatever you want to call it, university, a state school, all kinds of universities in the United States and in Canada, where you have students who are there supposedly to get enlightened, to get an education, to have a vocation, to graduate and learn and be open-minded, are actually on campus supporting Hamas, supporting Hezbollah, actually putting on the gear, calling for death to America, calling for death to Israel, burning American flags, burning Israeli flags on US campuses. So Donald Trump comes in and is really tackling this situation, cutting funding, making an example out of schools like Columbia and Harvard, like UPenn, like UCLA, where we are seeing some changes on those campuses. Harvard being the example that is fighting back, that is not making those changes. They got their funding cut. It will continue that way. Now, the applications, they're stopping to look at and review applications to let in these foreign students for visas. Look, again, will good students be punished for this? Absolutely. But their system has to be vetted. The system has to be revamped. There has to be some sort of referendum here where we don't allow these extremists onto our campuses. The other thing I want to point out is if we stop these students from coming, we still have another issue. We still have foreign money coming into these campuses. You will still have foreign influence. They will still find their students, whether it's in Middle Eastern studies programs, in women's studies programs, in journalism school programs. And I speak from experience, from being in these programs and knowing that this is where they find radicalized students and are able to poach them, to give them scholarships, to give them fellowships with the money that's coming in from these foreign actors. Qatar being the number one foreign sponsor of these programs on US campuses. Look, it comes in as a soft power, as a soft power move. They're giving the money for enlightenment. They're giving the money for scholarships. They're giving the money for endowments. But they have a say. They will censor material. They will make that curriculum anti-American. They will make that curriculum anti-Israel. And that is why we saw those encampments. And there is definitely a correlation. So we have to really study this entire thing and get to the root of it, what the problems are. It's not just the students, it's also the funding, and just to revamp the whole system entirely.
Wow. Okay, so going from academics, let's talk about tourism right now. We're getting kind of into that travel season right now with the summer upon us. But American tourists traveling to Venezuela are being warned by the US government to avoid going to the country, period, or exclamation point, right? So the US has placed the highest level travel advisory, which is level 4. The risks of going to Venezuela include wrongful detention, torture in detention, kidnapping, the list goes on. And if American travelers still want to tempt fate and get into trouble, there's no US consulate in Venezuela to help them. Lisa, I can't imagine anyone would want to go to Venezuela after this warning.
Oh, Jeanette, you would be surprised. We still have Americans wanting to go to Iran, wanting to go to North Korea, wanting to go to Venezuela. Maybe they're even more attracted to the idea of going to some sort of place that is forbidden. I don't know.
Maybe.
Remember Adam and Eve from the
Yes,
Bible.
yes,
So,
of course.
yes, so forbidden is a draw. Listen, we just got back another American held hostage in Venezuela. This is the government saying we will not negotiate on your behalf. Just don't go, don't become a pawn. We know, as you read off the list of risks that are associated with going there, you can be abducted. There is terrorism, there are cartels, there are bad actors, and the government is no bueno. So do not go. Go onto YouTube. You can see a lot of videos about the beauty of the country, and hopefully one day when we see some sort of regime change there, you can go at that point. But there are many other beautiful places to visit in South America, Central America that will do the job.
Yeah, no, certainly. Okay, so Lisa, so far US President Donald Trump has been unsuccessful at directing the end of the war between Russia and Ukraine. And Trump claims his Truth Social post that if it weren't for him, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia. And he's now warning Russian President Vladimir Putin that he's playing with fire. So what are your thoughts on this, Lisa?
So there's already been a response from the Russian side to this post saying, you're saying we're playing with fire? Well, does World War III mean anything to you? So it's a threat that is being responded to with a threat. And of course, they're talking about nuclear weapons being used in this war as well. So look, Donald Trump has said many times that this war wouldn't have happened on his watch, but yet, unfortunately, as much as he has tried, his administration has not been able to stop this war, and it is obviously because of the madman that Putin is. So now Trump is saying, "Look, we've played the nice way, and you haven't played along, but you're playing with fire," meaning you are absolutely. Risking a lot by not cooperating with us and ending this war. So now we may not be so nice. So already yesterday, sanctions were announced against Russia. But I don't know if sanctions are enough to deter this man. We thought that he did want an off ramp, and that's what Donald Trump kept saying. This guy wants to end the war just as bad as the Ukrainians do. Let's do it. But as we saw over the weekend, it has been horrific. It has gotten even worse. We are seeing an uptick in the number and the severity of the strikes on both sides. And yes, this war has to end. But as Marco Rubio said very, very astutely, he said we have to stop having talks about having talks. So what will be the end result? And I think that the Trump administration is really after results at this point.
Yeah, and speaking of Russia, the International Olympic Committee has confirmed that a ban on Russian teams remains in effect for the 2026 Winter Olympics. The ban was put into place following the military invasion of Ukraine, which began, of course, as we know, in February of 2022. So do you know if individual Russian athletes are allowed to compete, for example, a figure skater?
Right. So, it's unfortunate because as we know, the Russians do very well. They have some great athletes. And this is sports diplomacy. This is how it works. We have economic diplomacy with sanctions, we have sports diplomacy to ban them, but unfortunately, with a madman like Putin at the helm, the Russian people will only suffer, and not Russia itself. Obviously, this is a bragging right. When your country goes to the Olympics and gets awards, so it is to punish Putin. But Putin doesn't measure his success by Olympic gold medals. Unfortunately, he is more into grabbing land and creating an empire and creating something more for himself and his legacy. So I don't know if this is going to be enough of a deterrence for him, or the sanctions, or anything else, or any of the diplomatic talk or threats that we've seen from Donald Trump in the last few days. But we are working towards, and I guess the international community should really get credit for this, working towards some sort of off ramp for Putin, the madman.
All right. Lisa Daftari, editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk. Thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate
Of
it.
course, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.